Jeff Lynn from Cedars, a new crowdfunding platform, the first to get FSA approval, I understand it?
Yep.
Yep.
Great, thanks very much. As Eddie said, my name is Jeff Lynn. I'm CEO and co-founder of Cedars. And we are an online platform for investing in startups. We are the first platform not only to get FSA approval, but to get regulatory approval anywhere in the world. I want to talk a little bit about the crowdfunding space in general for a few minutes, and then I'll go into more details on Cedars. And just to sort of put it in context, we see crowdfunding as part of the overall movement of finance moving online, and in particular, finance as being a source of disruptive innovation. For years, obviously, banks and other traditional financial institutions have used the web to communicate with their customers, but probably part of the reason you all are here tonight and this group exists is that, unlike a lot of other places, finance startups have been fewer on the ground. That's changing. It's changing in a whole number of ways. We've already heard from a fantastic one. We'll hear from more. But the space I want to talk about is about raising finance from peers online. And it breaks down into sort of three basic categories. The terminology around this is all moving. But it's about peer-to-peer lending. It's about what we call rewards-based crowdfunding. And then finally, crowdfund investing or returns-based crowdfunding. And the final one is where the space Cedars is in. So just to sort of put these into context, they have a lot of similarities, certain key differences. Peer-to-peer lending, which most of you are probably familiar with, is about an individual or a company borrowing money in small amounts from lots of individual lenders. Sometimes, such as in Funding Circle, the lenders pick who they lend to. Sometimes, as in Zopa, it's more of a pooled system. Key is it's debt. It is about loans. The interest rates are anywhere between 6 and 12%, which tends to mean that you're looking at credit-worthy borrowers. It's personal borrowers, and it's operating businesses. Funding Circle, for example, you need to have a 2-year operating history. It's really for small and medium-sized businesses looking for ongoing working capital. Of the three areas, it's really the oldest and best established, and it really has a tremendous history in the UK, in that Zopa pioneered it in 2005 before anybody did it in the US, and then Funding Circle in 2010 was the first major platform, I think, anywhere in the world to do it for operating businesses. It's growing fantastically. I highly recommend you check out some of the sites if you haven't already. It's a brilliant way to get better than bank interest on some relatively safe loans. The second area is rewards-based crowdfunding. This is Kickstarter, Indiegogo, many of the platforms that have really sprung up in the last couple of years. The key there is the entrepreneur receives what are essentially contributions from individual funders in exchange for non-monetary rewards. And the key with these is that there is no return. It is about the enjoyment of participation, and it's about the rewards you get. Some sites like Kickstarter are virtually e-commerce platforms. You're given the opportunity to buy a cool poster or a cool product in exchange for your contribution. Some are a little bit more altruistic. Some are more focused on the kind of micro-patronage, mini-Medici thing. This is a fantastic space as well. So far, the UK, it's getting a lot of feedback, is there? So far, the UK, I'll try to stand in. The UK has not had as much in this space. Kickstarter, which is US only, has really been the strongest. Indiegogo, which operates sort of globally, but is really a US platform as well. There are a few popping up here that are very exciting. Bloom VC, we're very good friends with out of Scotland, are moving into the space. There are some other fantastic ones as well. And finally, there's crowdfund investing, for lack of a better term, and I've never particularly liked that term, but that's what the folks in the US are starting to call it. This is about an entrepreneur receiving small investments from lots of individual investors in exchange for equity. It can be like peer-to-peer lending. It can be pooled, or it can be individual-based. I think what we're going to see primarily here is going to be people investing in individual businesses rather than on a pooled basis. But the key here is it's about the upside. It's the high-risk investments. This is for entrepreneurs. This is startups. These are businesses that will usually fail. But when they succeed, they can succeed big, and it gives people the opportunity either to take sort of a punt and try to get life-changing returns, or to be a mini angel, to build up a portfolio of startups and try to get the returns that come from that. This is the most nascent of the spaces, primarily because of legal restrictions. It is a tough space to crack from a legal and regulatory perspective. Many people have been trying it for a long time. I'm very pleased that Cedars was the first to actually get through a regulatory process, but there are others out there operating already outside of the regulatory process, and with some of the developments in the US legislation elsewhere, we're sure that there are going to be lots more coming up in the coming years. So, with that background, I just want to talk a little bit about the crowdfund investing space, and particularly what we're trying to address with Cedars. we noticed two basic problems in the early stage investing world. The first is a lack of access to idea stage capital, genuine seed stage capital, first £100,000 or less that an entrepreneur needs to build a minimum viable product or take some other first step before seeking more capital or launching. This is not available to most people. It's too small for institutional investors. VCs don't invest at that level. In the UK and Europe, at least, angels really don't either. Only about 3% of angel deals are seed, and an even smaller percentage are idea stage, because seed can sometimes cover later stage. And so what you're left with is sort of friends and family. And if you have wealthy friends and family who can invest 25 or 50,000 pounds of high-risk capital, you get off the ground. And if you don't, you don't. And it's amazing, and I'm not really an anti-establishment, Occupy movement type guy, but it's amazing when you look at the kind of class bias that goes into who actually gets startups to the point where they're actually able to start talking to angels and VCs. I was talking the other day with David Young, Lord Young, who is the Prime Minister's entrepreneurship advisor, and he even said, everybody who comes in my door, probably bar me, but it seems to be from a very, very well-to-do background. I said, yes, of course, that's because nobody who isn't from a well-to-do background, with very few exceptions, is getting this first bit of capital. So what we see is vast number of startups failing to raise the initial capital they need to even take a first step, to even appear on the radar. And it's not just about tech businesses, it's about businesses of all varieties. The other problem in the early stage investing world is on the investor side, and that is that there are a lot of people who would love to invest a bit in startups. But investing today is limited really to the very wealthy, and is not open to the mass affluent. Why do people want to invest? Part of it's the returns. There's a fantastic study, very little data is out there on what angel and startup returns look like. A lot of data on VC returns, but that's a very different asset class. Angel returns are different. The one study that's come out in the UK, and there's another one in the US, showed fantastic net returns, highly skewed, most fail, but the winners make up for it and have an average IRR of 22%, 2.2x over 3.6 years. Most people don't know that, but as they learn it, they say, wow, actually, if I could get access to this kind of portfolio, that's going to outperform pretty much any other asset class I can get. But on top of that, it's more than returns. It's the excitement. People like being part of something. They like being part of a cool startup. They like being dragons. Through 4 and whatever million people watch Dragon's Den. Many of those people like to sit there and say, I like that one. I wouldn't touch that one with a 10-foot pole. And they want the chance to participate on their own. There's the general diversification into alternative asset classes. There's the friends and family angle. If you want to invest £250 in your friend's business today, there's no way to do it. The transaction costs would far overwhelm the investment amount. And then there's also tax relief. And the government has adopted a very, very wide-ranging new scheme called Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. Many of you will already be familiar with EIS. And that helps de-risk and incentivize all sorts of people to invest. Problem is, you basically have to be in the top 1% to invest today. And the way you think about that is that it takes at least £10,000 for it to make an angel investment, often more, but you wouldn't invest really as an angel at less than £10,000. If you have any desire to build up a portfolio of angel investments, that basically means £100,000 to £150,000 invested in startups as an asset class. You're not going to put more than 10 or 15% of your capital into startups as an asset class, so that means being worth £1 million, basically. You can challenge that a bit, but that's basically the number. Investable capital in this country, as in most developed countries, is held by about the top 20%. And so that 2 to 20% range, young professionals, small business owners, middle managers, academics, civil servants, these are people who have a bit of capital that they'd love the opportunity to put to work, either to grow or to support a business that they like or to support friends and family. They can't do so today. So we invented a platform to let them invest in startups. And it's actually a quite straightforward platform. Those of you who are familiar with peer-to-peer lending will be familiar with much of the structure, but let me just sort of talk you through it briefly. An entrepreneur comes onto the platform, discloses information about his or her business, which we review from a disclosure perspective. We don't make a business judgment about these businesses, but we make sure that the disclosures are sensible. They also say how much they're looking to raise and for how much equity, and it's done on a take it or leave it, all or nothing basis. Investors then come on, and anyone can invest. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how much investing experience you have. All you have to do is complete a short quiz that shows us that you understand the risks of investing in startups. You pass that quiz, you can browse startups, you can invest from £10 at the minimum up to the full amount that the startup is seeking, and all the documentation is done online. And you pick your individual businesses. There's no fund aspect to this. Businesses that don't receive everything they're seeking, everybody gets their money back and it's a wash. Businesses that do, we then go do a legal due diligence process on them, make sure that the investment is what it says it is, enter into a subscription agreement, and then subscribe for the shares as nominee of the underlying investors. So we hold the shares on behalf of the investors. We then take a 7.5% fee from the entrepreneur. So if you've raised £100,000, you get a check for £92,500, and we take a £7,500 commission. Going forward, the entrepreneur gets essentially all of the benefits of having a large base of people with vested interest in them, with a vested interest in their success, without the disadvantages. We're the sole legal shareholder. You need a consent issued for a VC round, you need a signature, you need a vote cast, you come to us. But you want some support, you want a connection to somebody, you want to figure out somebody who can help you with some coding problem, you can reach out to your entire investor base. And from the investor's perspective, they get the chance to participate, follow the growth of this startup and any others that they're invested in, all while we do the work of being the shareholder on their behalf. The only commission we take from them is on the upside. If they receive a profit off their investment through dividends or through sale of the shares, we take a 7.5% carry. I want to talk very briefly about SEIS. I mentioned it earlier, but some of you may not be familiar with it. I just want to emphasize just how crucial this is. We're focused on businesses. Cedars is focused specifically on pre-revenue businesses seeking £100,000 or less. And although it wasn't, it almost feels like the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme was kind of written for us because it is a set of reliefs much greater than the Enterprise Investment Scheme that applies to companies raising up to £150,000 and that are genuine seed stage companies. The key headline number with this is that if you have enough income and if you have capital gains that you can offset against, during 2012 to 2013, if you invest in an SEIS eligible company, you can get 78% of your money back from the government straight off. So that means you invest £100,000, you've got £22,000 left on the table, $78,000 off. That's obviously a major de-risker for many people. It's also a huge magnifier of returns. From 2013 on, 28% of that goes away, but you still get 50% relief. And while EIS investing has always been first at 20% and then 30%, a nice little sweetener for people who wanted to invest in startups, we think this is going to be transformative. We think that a lot of people who have not invested in startups before, who have not been part of the startup ecosystem, are going to want to be. Certainly that's what the government thinks, that's why they introduced it, and that's what they want to see happen. We think it'll happen too. I want to talk about FSA authorization for a moment and why it's relevant to us and why it's important. This is real financial services. When you're dealing with investments, equity investments, you are dealing with all the same issues that you're dealing with when you deal with shares on a stock exchange. And actually, in some ways, you're dealing with more complicated issues. And the great risk in a crowdfunding is not fraud. What everybody often talks about is, well, what if the guys steal my money and run away with it? Well, there are ways to control against that through a number of protective measures and through due diligence. It can't be completely eliminated, but the percentage of times it's going to happen are going to be really, really, really slim. The much worse risk, though, is that the deal fails to be structured properly. The company goes on to become the next Facebook, but you as the investor don't wind up getting the benefit of it. That is where unregulated crowdfunding platforms are going to meet their demise, we think. And while there are all sorts of technical arguments around whether certain platforms, and you'll be familiar with one or two of them perhaps, that operate outside the regulatory regime are technically in compliance or not, the lack of FSA supervision and the lack of trust that comes from being supervised and subject to a series of systems and controls and the systems that implement them is going to cause a lot of problem when one of these platforms has its first success. We figured that beyond the fact that we believe as a technical matter authorization was required, we think it's a good thing. We think it gives investors confidence that the FSA has poured over every single aspect of our business. They know everything that we're going to do. And getting our application was approved the beginning of this month, subject to capitalization. The final capital will come in next month and will be authorized by the end of April before we launch. Getting that authorization we saw as a really key element to doing this business properly. I'll just quickly walk you through the timeline. This has been a very long process. We actually started this, my co-founder and I, in business school 3 years ago. We've been on it full-time 2 years. We spent 18 months working on developing the model to even bring it to the FSA. It was an 11-month-long process before the FSA gave us approval. And now we're all moving really quickly. We closed a great funding round a couple of weeks ago. We won London Web Summit, which was a blast. We are now taking registrations and sign-ups on the site. We hope you'll do that. We hope you'll come on and sign up. And we're looking to do a full launch in May or June. We'll be UK only at first, with a view toward expanding through Europe and potentially the US as soon as possible. Finally, I just want to point out our awesome team. I co-founded the business with a chap called Carlos Silva. He runs our tech team from Portugal. We've got in the audience there Alicia, who's our marketing director. We have a great CTO called Duarte, fantastic compliance director Patrick, a wonderful investment director Tom, and he won't let me put him on the slide, but Martin back there runs PR for us and is also absolutely fantastic. We've also got a great board of non-execs, and in a couple of weeks we're going to announce a really exciting advisory board. And that is it. I'm very happy to take your questions, but let me just put the plug in. Sign up, sign up, sign up. We'd love to get pre-registrations to know who's interested. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and come talk with us after. Thank you.
So you've done the really hard bit of getting authorized. Now you've got to get people to use it.
Yep.
So what's your next big challenge?
Ask Alicia. No, look, we need to do two big things. One is get 20 to 30 really interesting businesses on the platform for day one. That is less of a challenge than one might think. There are awesome, awesome, awesome businesses all up and down this country. We see them every day. Before we even announced what we were doing, we were getting 2 or 3 businesses coming to us every day saying, are you open yet? When are you going to be open? Some are not that interesting, many really are. So we're in the process of starting to line up businesses. If anybody here is doing a startup and wants to talk to us about using us to raise £100,000 or less, please do. Second challenge is getting out to investors, and that is a bigger challenge for us because as much as I've talked about the benefits and all the people who watch Dragon's Den, this is not an opportunity that's been available to most people before, so it's very much a nascent demand. And so we're going to be working very hard to spread the word about the fact that this exists, about what early stage investing is, about what the risks are, which are very, very substantial, but what the rewards are as well. And our hope is that through a combination of PR, through social media, and through some more traditional methods of marketing, we can get that out there.
Hi, Jeff. What permission do you actually have from the FSA? Which category is it? Because I can't see an existing category that covers this. So yeah. What is it?
So we're arrangers of transactions, we're dealers in investments, we're managers of investments, and we're safeguard and administer assets, and we establish unregulated collective investment schemes. The collective investment scheme part's a little tricky because technically we're just acting as a nominee for a pooled group of investment into one business, but as a technical matter, that's a collective investment scheme as well. The core permissions, though, are the fact that we're managers and we're dealers. I mean, we are putting together investments, we're structuring investments, and we're managing them afterwards. And the mere fact that we're not making our own buy-sell decisions, it means that we're not advisors, and that's actually a key point. We are outside the whole advisory regime. We don't tell anybody we think you should invest in something, but by making this platform available, we come under a number of other categories.
Jeff, if someone has already a product and it's approved, and he is not in the very early stage and he's coming up to you and says, I need 500,000 sterling to get to the next step. You just said you only go for investments up to 100 grand.
Yeah, you know, it's a tricky one, and we've actually just had exactly that. I don't know if you're connected with the one we've actually just had of that, but look, we would love to be able to fund a range of businesses. We've chosen to limit to £100,000 and pre-revenue for 2 reasons, really. One is we think that's where the greatest market demand is. We think that once you get up to traction and seeking later stage capital, there are other sources to go to. There's still a shortage, there's still a huge equity gap, there's still a need for much more capital later on. But we're a little bit more worried about a selection bias at that point. We're worried that people who will come to us who couldn't raise VC money or couldn't raise angel money, and that will get the second tier. That won't happen at the startup, at the first level businesses, because there aren't really any other options. The second point is we want to get deals done. We want to get a lot of deals done early, and having too high of a target is going to mean a lot of busted deals, a lot of deals that don't get all the money they're seeking in their first 3 months, and that's going to result for us in a reputation like so many people have as just being a talking shop. So we want to do a lot of small deals, show that this is a place, especially for investors, where you're actually going to get to invest, not just give us your money for a couple months and then get it back. And we think that the sub £100,000 level is the right space to be. So for the time being, yeah, we're saying no to people who are looking for later stage capital. That could change someday. We'd love to. We want to see how it all develops, but that's our starting position.
Jeff, my question was about the FSA regulation.
Yeah.
You sounded quite happy with the way that the FSAs have handled it. I mean, it took a long time, but you want good regulation. Is that right? Is there anything else that you need from the regulators to enable more of companies like yours to come on stream?
It's a good question, and what I've told the government and would say on record is that I think the current legal system is about 90% right for this. There are a number of tweaks that could be made. We've had to do a couple of things that aren't ideal. I mean, for example, by way of example, one aspect of this system that creates additional cost for us is that we have to approve the disclosures of everybody who comes onto the platform, whether or not they get funded. It would be a lot easier for us if we could wait to do that approval process of only the deals that actually get funded. Doesn't work under the financial promotions rules today. Would love to see a tweak to it. But by and large, yeah, it took a long time and it wasn't easy. And maybe I look like the person, I think for the last 3 years I complained and moaned, and now that we're through, I'm saying, oh, no, it's all great, it's all great. But the truth be told, one of the interesting things, and you can hear from my accent, I'm American originally, I'm actually an American securities lawyer, so my experience and training was in financial regulation in the United States. And one of the really interesting things about the British system, the Financial Services and Markets Act, as compared to the US is, it was designed to be flexible, and it actually is kind of flexible. I mean, it may not be as flexible as it should be, but there were a series, what we've basically relied on have been a series of provisions that basically said if you're doing small fundraisings and you're doing some form of analysis, a meaningful analysis of whether the investors kind of understand what they're getting into, and that's this quiz process that we put forward, you have a lot of freedom to do what you want. And the fact that the FSA ultimately signed off on it, I think, is some level of indication for the fact that the rules broadly work as they are, even if they could be improved somewhat.
I was going to make a point about the a liquid aspect. I suppose sophisticated VC investors will be aware with an early stage investment that they're not going to be able to get their money out. How are you going to manage to sort of, I guess, the expectations of retail investors around that issue of not being able to have a secondary market in this?
By hitting them over the head with the words, there is no secondary market, you will not be able to get your money back until exit. And I mean, I'm not trying to be glib, but that's part of our quiz questionnaire. I mean, there are several questions on exactly illiquidity, and we say multiple times throughout the platform that exact message. And we think that people are smart enough to understand it.
Just a couple of quick questions,
Yeah.
Jeff. One is on your fees.
Yep.
They're reasonably high, I take it, obviously, because there's a lot of investment in this thing. What kind of hurdle rate are investors going to have to overcome to actually make returns on this kind of product?
So broken down into two fees, and let me maybe just talk through the structure a little bit. The 7.5% upfront, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, I will get to the hurdle rate in a second, but the 7.5% upfront finder's fee commission, bear in mind that the entrepreneurs don't have to pay any legal fees, including their own, if they don't want to. So for most businesses, it's going to be roughly a wash between structuring the deal themselves and structuring it through us. Might be slightly higher, but it will certainly be lower than if you go to an angel network, pay to pitch, pay 5% commission, and pay legal fees. It's going to be close to structuring a deal on your own. The 7.5% back end, we don't put a hurdle rate in, in the sense that any upside from any given deal, we take 7.5% off of. Our view is that if you're an investor in a fund, you're paying 2 and 20. We don't ask you to pay anything in the way of a management fee, and we're not taking 20% from you. Now, we're also not advising you, so you're not getting that value add from us, but we think that a 7.5% upside clip is helpful. In terms of what the overall performance would have to be, we really don't know. If you have to perform better than 7.5% to break even. I mean, we don't really. There's no way to have detailed expected returns.
Yeah. those are your platform charges, but there will be advisor charges unless the client comes direct to you.
Every client will come direct to us. We're not going to interface with IFAs or other platforms, at least at first. This is about self-directed investing.
Okay.
Jeff, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.